went down and pleaded my case, and survived. So, I mean, I think it's taking swings. Take swings. Have fun. Look, you got this great education, this great background. Why the hell would you want to be a cautious grunt? It makes no sense.
Here's a question that points in a different direction. It says, today people, this is work life. Today people are evaluated in terms of hours of work per week. Do you consider this a good measure? And I think this comes to how do you...
Where do you get that measure? I mean, I don't think that's even close. I think work is hard. People have to make choices. Work-life balance is a real struggle. We talk about work-life balance in a big section in here, and I think there's a couple things that go with that. First of all, when you think about work-life balance, you have to make some personal choices. You have to decide what you really want, and then you've got to manage your way through that, what you want thing. But one thing about work-life balance you have to really understand is that work-life balance has nothing to do with what's written in the company brochures. Work-life balance, that's all nonsense. Work-life balance is a deal you make with your boss. And your boss's job is to win and to look good and to grow the company. And your job is to help him do it as you win and grow the company. And if you deliver for your boss, and I call it the old-fashioned chit system. I saw it. I know how managers think about this. If you deliver for them, you earn flexibility. You'll get all the flexibility in the world to run. But if you come in, we have a story in the book of this person that was running a business, and they gave somebody a Friday, who had worked there for 10 years, they gave him a Friday and a Monday off, because the woman was a great worker, terrific, she could work at home, and she wanted to be with her young kids. And so they gave her Friday and Monday to stay home and work from home, and it was perfectly acceptable to the manager and everybody else. So what happened was, about 4 days later, this young kid who'd been in the company 6 months came prancing into the office saying, I'd like Friday and Mondays off too. And the boss said, well, why? What do you want? He said, I want to perfect my yoga practice. And the boss said to this young man, but you can't. You haven't delivered anything yet. We don't know this about you. You're not the same as Margaret. She's done this and that and the other. And he said, who are you to make a judgment? Who are you to make a judgment that motherhood is more important than my yoga practice? What right do you have? They weren't making that choice. That wasn't the choice they were making. They were judging somebody on performance versus somebody that was brand new and had the company brochure in their hand. You don't want to be that person. That person wasn't there a year later. You don't want to be that person with the rule book in your hand. You want to be the person that earns flexibility. Now, the problem is flexibility comes after a couple of years of getting the reputation, delivering the goods, and doing the job. Those are the hard facts, I think, of work-life balance. It may not be the most exciting thing to hear, but I think you'll find when you get somewhere. Now, you want to be in a family-friendly company that accepts performance and flexibility together. Right. But in general, that's the way it works.
Here's another question from the audience. What recommendation do you have to enhance corporate ethics, and what role does the academic community play in this equation?
I think that the academic, companies have to constantly reinforce it. At our company, we had every six months online integrity training things where we went over the gray areas so people could deal with the gray areas of this in regulation and other things. It takes constant policing. And it's silly to think that with 300,000 or 400,000 people in a company, you're ever going to have the only perfect 300,000 or 400,000 people. But you can have processes. When you look at what went wrong in corporate America, and I'll just take the broadest ones, okay? When you take Arthur Andersen had a breakdown in values. Why? Arthur Andersen went from being a great accounting firm, really, as you know, an incredible accounting firm, to in the 80s and 90s, liking consulting. Yeah. And all of a sudden you had the green eye shades going with the suspenders crowd. And they didn't, and the salaries were different. That company actually went to court over dividing the profits of the business. Now, how can you have a culture where you got the guys making all the money are in consulting, and they're dragging along the accountants who are living off them and resenting every day of it. And they finally just disrupted the company totally. Enron's a classic example. Enron was a first-class energy company. Pipeline, got your stuff from A to point B. And they were very good at it. And they were sort of steady, boring company. They didn't like that. They wanted to become more exciting. So what they do? They went to a trading company. So they traded in the white coveralls for the suspenders crowd and the slick back hair. And they got the traders. And all of a sudden you got traders going against this thing, and you've got an incredible dislocation in values. So none of the values that the companies had, it doesn't mean that the IBMs and the GEs and the DuPonts don't have people that violate the rules, but they have processes that are in place to clean it up early before it becomes a big event. But it'd be unreasonable to think you could have hundreds of thousands of people not having some violations. That's why cities like Tampa, Florida, with 500,000 people, have huge police forces. That's the way it is. But you got to have culture and values. And when you disrupt those values, as Enron did, as Arthur Andersen did, WorldCom had none. It was a guy who started a motel in Mississippi, started buying small telephone companies. They had no culture, no processes. In GE, for example, over the years, we've probably done everything wrong over the last 100 years. But every time we did it once wrong, we never did it again. Because we put in, I mean, I remember when I joined the company in '60, it was right after a price-fixing mess that the company had. God, the first month I was there, all we did was get tested and quizzed, and did we understand the policy, and be sure you never did it again. And then I had a scene on defense contracting troubles in the 80s, and we put in more policies to get people to do more things right and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. We won't have that problem again, I don't think, knock on wood. But it's always easy once you do it to put it in, but companies that have processes do it. Companies that have disrupted values don't have it.
How about the pressure to make the numbers? Does that make people do sometimes stupid things?
Most of the problems you have in a company are self-enriching. You'll have somebody steal copper out of a plant over the wire, or over the fence. You'll have, you'll have all that stuff that goes on, Mickey Mouse stuff. I don't think numbers drive the problem. That's not been my experience. Some people would argue it is.
One of the interesting parts that sort of follows on from some of these things in the book is dealing with crises. You advocate candor in a big way, and it sort of seems every PR consultant you talk to says candor. Why don't we see more of it? Why is the impulse to hide so strong?
I think it's human nature, don't you? You spent 3 years in Washington?
2, but yeah.
But no,
we hid nothing.
No, but I think you've seen scandal out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there are 5 phases of a scandal, really. The first one is, or crisis, even personal crisis. First one is deniability. It can't be. It can't be. And you got to get out of that phase instantly. You just got to get out of it. Secondly, you got to realize that everybody's going to know it. There are no secrets. There is not one single secret in the world. So the minute you have a crisis, be sure you define it for yourself. Because the third one is, no one's going to portray you in a good light. No one's out there. Your own employee's going to worry about it. The media is certainly not going to treat you well. And that's the fourth thing is, generally, in fixing this up, in fixing your crisis, there's usually new processes and blood spilled. Invariably it happens. You look at all the crises that have gone on, and you go through these steps, and that's what happens. And finally, you got to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and you have a company to run, and you'll be better for going through it. But all the time you're in it, what happens to most leaders is they get in a crisis, and they hunker down, and the vortex gets bigger and bigger, and down they go. And they forget they got a company to run, or a unit to run, or a restaurant to keep open, or a laundry to keep going. It's all these little hiding that just gets you in a